I'm walking in typical uphill mountain pasture. This is an absolutely beautiful place and it typifies the west of Ireland, particularly in terms of the species of grass, the wildflowers that grow here, the heather, the gorse. Everything combines here to produce an amazing carpet of natural beauty. I'm also fascinated by the fact that ancient people lived here. They actually walked on the very rock platform that I'm on here at the moment. And how I can tell that is because they've left some circular marks or rock art here in the sandstone, the old red sandstone. Now the sandstone is over 300 million years old. These marks are possibly somewhere in the region of 2000 BC, so 4,000 years ago. And what I'm fascinated about is these ancient cultures live in unison with nature. I love the idea that in a modern world we can come up to the uplands like here and we can see species such as hare, we can see stoat, we can see birds like chough, ravens, things that you don't normally see, and they're here. And it's on these pastures that cattle graze, that sheep graze. And it's the heathers and the wildflowers and the grasses that of course give the meat of these animals their absolute gorgeous flavour.
It is legal to burn between the 1st of September and the 28th of February each year, but outside of those times it's totally illegal to do so. In living memory, I recall small farming communities much more engaged with the land than their modern day counterparts. Depending on seasonal cycles, farmers grew crops and reared mixed herds of sheep and cattle. Tending to the land was commonplace. Controlled burning was easier to achieve given that small areas were set alight. Animals were then grazed on the emerging grasses.
In talking about ancient cultures, obviously when fire was discovered or made, people use it to cook on and also then to clear land and scrub. And in a modern day sense, we tend to control fire. We can warm our houses with it, and it's an absolutely wonderful thing to do. The atmosphere is superb in a house in the winter when it's cold. But what about outside when fires are set on mountainsides and they, including with wind and oxygenated fires, they run up the hills so fast, burnt in a matter of hours. Now I've seen it with my own eyes, for instance, the aftermath of burning, and as I'm speaking here I can actually just see across me that somebody has set one of the mountains here on fire, and with the wind today it's possible that that could spread quite quickly and cover quite an area or expanse of upland pasture.
In modern times, these fires rage over entire mountainsides. Out of control and burning with an intensity never before seen, they are a threat to human health and habitation, and they are detrimental to wildlife. In this programme, I want to find out why these fires are raging out of control. I also want to see if there are any solutions to this modern day divisive issue. I also want to find out why fires are being started outside of the prescribed burning period. In order to achieve this, I need to visit a number of people.
I don't recall, I've been here for 25 years, I don't actually recall hill burning when I first came here in the 1990s. I didn't see it at all. But in the last 10 years or more, it has been increasingly, we've observed it as being increasingly a problem. It's been occurring out of the legal seasons. It's been occurring outside the months when any burning is legal. And as far as I've seen, it's not been part of any managed plan for burning, the landscape. It just seems to be quite erratic, if you like. Right through the year, we can expect burning here of the of lowland and upland at any time of the year when the land dries out sufficiently for burning. This can be in May, June, July, all through August, all through the year. It doesn't seem to make any difference. One of the big losses in the upland areas has been the red grouse from this area, and we also did have twite breeding on the coastal cliffs in the deep heather there. Now that heather has declined for one reason or another, seem to have lost our twite as a breeding population on the peninsula altogether. The last record was in 2006, and we've no record of them breeding since then, which is a great shame.
So I think what I'm beginning to hear is there's some kind of thing happening to the environment.
Burning that heather must have contributed to the decline of Twight, one would think, along with overgrazing and a failure to have any management plan for Twight on the peninsula.
As I leave Jill in the Dingle Peninsula behind, I am now much more informed as to the direct consequence of high-intensity fires to habitats and ground wildlife, in particular bird populations. My next port of call is to the town of Kenmare in South Kerry. Here, I talk to councillor and farmer Dan McCarthy. I want to gain insight into current farming practice and the difficulties facing rural, but especially hill farmers.
It's part of the way of life of the mountain farmers for the last hundreds of years. They always burned in the spring, and it left the new vegetation come. If this burning is not allowed to happen, the vegetation will take over. The sheep won't be able to graze it, and it'll be no good for nothing. If there's parts of the country, you could set wheat one year, you could set oats another year, you could have cattle the following year, you could have sheep the year after. In this part of the country, we have two choices. We have either cattle or sheep. There's no such thing as tillage. You can't plough the hills, and there's a lot of this land that you can't even put cattle on it, that the sheep are the only thing that will graze it.
I asked Dan about bureaucratic restrictions placed upon farmers, especially in relation to payments.
They'll say it didn't graze, they won't pay you for it now. Like that have come in the last number of years. They can see you from the sky, and if it's not grazed, you won't get paid. Or if it's not arable land that animals can't graze it, you won't get paid for it. The burning have been there for generations, and if once it's done in controlled manner, and once the farmers have a chance to do it when there's a few fine days, there's no problem with it. The farmers and the wildlife have lived in this country for generations, and until the bureaucrats start to take you over and telling the farmer what to do with his land, I think that's where the big fall down on this is.
How do you feel about farmers breaking the law then?
Well, sure, if you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law, and there's no point in saying, you should break the law, because you can't break the law. But farmers will get frustrated, and you either you'll be fined one way or the other. You'll either be fined for burning or you'll be fined for not burning. So all it is another 3 or 4 weeks. If it was extended to the 1st of April, the farmer, surely some 2 or 3 dry days will come in March that he could burn what he have to burn, and it would be done, and there'd be no more about it.
It seems that hill farmers' hands are tied. Does the current system of payments and penalties need changing? In this context, an extension to the burning season seems like a reasonable request. Next, I meet uphill farmer James Fitzgerald. He explains why there needs to be an extension to the burning season.
So Finan is a very important part of a sheep's diet at the beginning of the year, but that's not the case as it grows and grows, because it becomes unpalatable, is that
They
right?
won't eat it, no. It gets quite sour.
Okay, and it grows quite tall, I believe.
Yeah, it can be up to 2 feet maybe. You know.
And this is an example of it here. So this is the young leaves, or the young shoots, I suppose, in among the Finan here. You can see how difficult it is to to actually try and find the Finan, the new growth in among this here. I have to pull it back actually, and once I pull it back, then I can actually see it quite clearly there. You can see it there. You would set a particular area on fire. Is it difficult to control that fire?
No. We'd if I was doing some burning previous to the new regulations where you have to notify the fire brigade, etc., I'd have a shovel and I'd be on the edges, and stop it. And the more frequently you burn, like if you burn it every year, you won't have you won't have a major fire. It's because it's left for years that they go out of control, really. The 30th of March would be suitable, yes. That would be suitable. March would be suitable, always was. And in March, you get weather that places will dry out. In February, even if you get a dry spell, there's no drying. It doesn't, the ground doesn't dry.
More informed, I take time out to gather my thoughts. The balance between maintaining healthy habitats for wildlife and managing uphill farming needs is a difficult one to achieve. The consequence of leaving mountainside pasture to grow wild means that efforts to control fires is proving much more difficult. My next stop is to visit Killarney Fire Station to talk to Fire Station Officer Paddy Mangan. Paddy and his crew are at the front line in dealing with out-of-control hillside fires.
We're just on a call with the local fire service and we're in the tender. We're heading to a mountainside gorse fire. Now all hands are on deck here and we're not too sure as to whether it's a big fire or what, but once we get there apparently there'll be an assessment done and that'll determine how many units actually turn up. So let's go. Paddy, I just wanted to ask you in the context of when there is a big mountainside gorse fire and there's one of the units or maybe even two of the units out fighting that, who then minds Killarney in terms of the potential for going to other accidents or other emergency situations? What happens then?
The procedure that we would follow at the time, we would contact the senior officer, whoever would be on call at the time, and we'd inform them that our two appliances are out of town dealing with an incident and that there's no fire cover or anything like that within the town, and they would make the decision then to deploy crew from some other neighbouring station to come in and stay on standby within to handle any incident that might happen within that area at the time.
So it can be quite irresponsible for an individual to light a fire and literally just walk away and not be bothered with the fact that the consequences down the line are that there may not be cover in some towns, for instance, if all units are out trying to fight a huge blaze.
Yeah, it's completely irresponsible, and unfortunately, that happens. It has happened in the past, where towns have been left without any cover due to the likes of these fires, these large fires on the mountains, things where crews are completely committed to that, and it's something these people just don't think about. And God forbid, if it was one of their own family that had a car accident down the road, I'm sure they'd probably be the first ones to come complaining, why weren't you there to help?
Yes.
They don't think of these things.
Raging mountainside fires require the utmost attention of fire service personnel. Assessment, wind direction, which area to control first, how many units are needed, ensuring the safety of both crew and the general public, and securing private property against fire damage are paramount. Decision making is critical to a successful conclusion in bringing mountainside fires under control.
A mountain pasture which an out of control fire took hold of, and to me it's a relatively lifeless place now, because obviously you've got the grass which has been fantastically productively reproduced in the context of its growth, but there's nothing else. I mean, in areas adjacent here that haven't been burnt, I'm seeing ground spiders, I'm seeing wildflowers, I'm seeing lots of snails, but in this entire landscape behind me I've found one dead snail. Now you would expect to see these en masse, but the reality is that this place, because it's been burned a good few times over the past few years, there's nothing here. What can I say?
To help me understand why the intensity of these fires is increasing, I travel to meet Department of Agriculture fire expert Kieran Nugent. Kieran studies risk assessment and fire management and offers valuable insights into traditional and present uphill agricultural methods, and proposes a change in technique in bringing fire into this landscape.
The key issue with fire and with a lot of the ecological issues that are there is having viable upland agriculture. And again, to go back to the upland agriculture, fire is an integral part of how those farmers do their business.
Yes.
And we've spent a lot of time talking to upland farmers to see what it is that they do and what they need to do. And there's a tradition of burning in the uplands. And again, the landscape that we're now in has changed. The tradition is there, the tradition is valid. The technique that's used nowadays doesn't fit that landscape. The technique that farmers are using to bring fire into that landscape is causing a lot of problems. It's generating larger fires. Those techniques may have worked 50 years ago, 60 years ago. They don't work anymore. The weather is different, the land is different. And from my perspective, I would like to see better, more modern, scientific, technical fire techniques being adopted by farmers. We're in the process of introducing that.
Just in terms of, you know, some of the wildlife, the lesser wildlife, as I always say, the hidden stuff, like the lizards, the ground spiders, you know, the moths, the butterflies, the cocoons, all of those. Like, constant burning of that is obviously going to show a huge reduction across the board in that. What are your thoughts on trying to manage even that?
I think it's a matter of knowing, and it's a matter for the people to know what the effects of different operations, not just burning, overgrazing can be an issue, undergrazing can be an issue. It's the effect of knowing what the outcomes of our actions are, regardless of what the particular situation is. There's means of reducing those effects and limiting the size of where people are burning, limiting the size of fires certainly is one of them. If an entire mountain of 1,000 hectares is burned in one operation, there's going to be absolutely 100% adverse impacts, regardless of how intense or how low level the fire is. If you can limit the size of blocks that are being burned, we can create a mosaic, and you can provide refuges that if there is, that animals can go to.
I just brought you to a bramble bush, and these are lovely new fresh shoots. Last year I found an emperor moth, and she laid eggs in a jam jar. And normally when they fly and lay eggs, usually around April, May, they lay them on the undersides of the bramble bush, or they lay them on the undersides of heather, in the leaves of heather bushes. If you start burning heather in the uplands, you're actually going to burn the cocoons here. And believe it or not, inside these cocoons, which lay dormant for 9 months, and they emerge as moths in April, is this. This is a pupae. This is an emperor moth pupae. And if you can just get a close-up of it there, you might be able to see it move. It's actually alive, this thing. So it's incredible to think that this thing turns into a moth. So burning every year the uplands means that you're going to decrease the biodiversity of smaller species such as moths, butterflies, ground spiders, other animals like that.
Limiting the size of fires, reducing the area of burning, creating a mosaic where wild animals can seek refuge is a way forward. This all points to engagement with farmers and viable vegetation management. I talked to Dr. Barry O'Donoghue.
I've seen, for instance, in areas that have been burned year on year, with the intensity of some of the fires, in fact most of the fires that I've seen living where I do have been out of control. I don't think I've seen an in-control one. Vast areas now where it's just fanon, it's just grass. There's nothing else there. So talk to me a little bit about the wildlife, the effects on wildlife from the ground up, the ground spiders, the snails. What happens year on year if that keeps going?
And like, people watching now, it might, some people are interested in spiders and snails, and they're fantastic, and there's so much biodiversity. Like, if you get in there and get in amongst the vegetation, you can see the jungle of wildlife that's in there. It's just fantastic.
It is.
But it mightn't necessarily grab the attention from a lot of people. Spiders, snails, but it's actually, they're all linked, like you say, from the ground up. So the habitat feeds onto the small animals, and those spiders, those snails, etc. That's what the birds need. That's what our skylarks need. That's what our meadow pipits need. That's what our cuckoos need, etc.
And
that feeds on from there. So the enjoyment that people might be getting out of hearing the cuckoo on a summer's day, or hearing the skylark singing in the sky, etc. Or the stone chat calling away. That's all related. They're all depending on the same habitat. And if that habitat is burnt year after year after year, that vegetation, like you say, it won't come back as it was. It'll come back as the fanon, it'll come back as the grass, and you're losing that biodiversity, you're losing the colour, you're losing the spirit of the area, really, and then again, I suppose that feeds on, even thinking beyond wildlife,
What's your position then in relation to prosecutions? Have people been prosecuted for burning outside of the season?
Yes, so again, the season is from the 1st of March until the 31st of August, and if somebody burns during that period, they are liable to prosecution. And the National Parks and Wildlife Service have taken successfully taken 40 prosecutions since 2011 under Section 40, which deals with the burning and hedge cutting. So there has been 40 successful prosecutions. The maximum fine is €1,000.
Yeah.
And but there's also a possibility of basic payments if it was a farmer that it could be in jeopardy also. Like if environmental laws are being broken, that the basic payment is linked to adhering to various laws, including the environmental laws.
And do you think that's a strong enough deterrent?
Well, I suppose
in your professional capacity.
I guess the experience so far has been probably not, because the fires keep happening, and I don't think a farmer gets up in the morning and decides, well, I'm going to go out and destroy this place. There is obviously policy and markets that are influencing their decisions, and I think that's ultimately what needs to be looked at, and to engage with the farmers. The stick is one thing, and we're not going to solve the issues by using the stick or prosecutions, etc. But I think there needs to be more engagement with the farming community. There needs to be more maybe locally led programs, etc., looking at the whole burning issue and see how can we learn
like a community-based
exactly. How can we learn from each other and to get in the holistic approach, with grazing, etc., and try to support that and try to get things back to as they might have been, with regard to vegetation management.
We've got three groups. We've got the environmentalists, we've got the public at large, and we've got the farmer. They're all right. What we need to do is we need to get them to sit down around a table and start to engage and talk about the issue of mountainside burning. By doing that, we'll get a workable solution going forward, and perhaps maybe in the end everybody can sit back and say that we have done it. We have gotten a good result here for the environment, for the farmers, and for the public at large.
I just really want to take you under this world and show you what I feel and what I see. It's absolutely incredible, so I'd like you to come with me and let's go under there.
Diving underwater in Ireland is an incredible experience. Next week, we journey into the depths to swim with dolphins, to show you basking shark on the surface and other marine creatures which are just fascinating to watch.